Well, good morning, everybody. As we start off today with some satellite data, we can see early this morning here the large complex of storms that's kind of run its way like this through the Midwest. This is kind of a decaying but large arcing line of storms that honestly the models did a pretty good job picking up on the other day. We can also continue to watch the heavy rains that are going over parts of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, where we have flood problems going on right in through this corridor. And that is Dexter over here spinning off. We're going to talk more about that in a second. But just take a look again at the wildfire smoke that is in place. And maybe if I just take you back through the overnight hours and show you last night, we can once again just see the Canadian wildfire smoke, the smoke that's spreading through the central United States. And again, the larger fires that continue. Matt did a good job talking about these yesterday in the forecast video in parts of the Southwest and Four Corners states. This ridge is going to be an important piece of the near-term forecast for the heat, but I'm more curious, to be honest with you, about the ridge that's going to be later in the flow, that's going to be possibly over the southeast. And I'm thinking a lot about that because of what's going on in the tropics. So I wanted to show you this morning as the sun rises, Dexter's dealing with a little bit of wind shear. So you can see here's the center of circulation, but the deeper convection is farther downstream, meaning that we're getting some stronger wind shear aloft, pushing the deepest convection, the upper level cloud shield away. We already saw a little bit of that yesterday. So there's Dexter. And as we got late in the afternoon and evening, in addition to having a lot of smoke on the northern side of this, you can start to see the decoupling of the system here. Now, thinking this through, because we're going to go into a tropical forecast right away here, I want to think about some of these bigger metrics we've been talking about. Now, the Atlantic shear has been bumbling around average since we got into July and August. It spent more time above average than below. And remember, low wind shear is conducive to allowing tropical systems to develop quickly. The shear lately has dropped, though, across the whole of the tropical Atlantic. Maybe not over Dexter, but over the rest of the tropical Atlantic. That's one important piece. The second piece about this is that lately we've seen the instability increase. So see the dots here indicating an increase in vertical instability. This would allow tropical thunderstorms to develop. That's another conducive element to tropical development in the the Atlantic. And then as of very late, the pressure was quite high and it's since started to drop. And as we see the drop overall in the pressure, again, it's just another ingredient about tropical system development in the Atlantic. And finally, the last thing I want to show you here is the ocean temperatures. They have lately started to trend back up again. We're well above the historical averages. And so this just points to more activity. And right now we are watching Dexter. It's going to continue to decay with time across the North Atlantic. The National Hurricane Center has given a 40% chance of something developing off the Carolina coast. And I know right now in the National Hurricane Center's summary, we have this main area over which we're going to watch develop, but there is something trailing this that I need to keep an eye on that's got me concerned about the potential track going toward the Lesser and Greater Antilles and maybe making it in, to the southeast or into the Gulf. I think that's going to be critical to watch. And some of the models are picking up on it. So what you're watching here is an animation. It's a 10-day loop that shows the system. So here's one. There goes Dexter. You can see the next little chance of development here, not too strong. The big blob right into there, it's going to curl around the Bermuda High. But what I'm interested in here are these two things. Watch right there. Okay. See this? And then I want you to watch this. Now, this only goes out 10 days, but there's a second clustering of low pressure in there that we need to be paying closer attention to because it's really starting to show up in these models. Okay, so here's the new European model. We're looking at low level, so 850 wind field with mean sea level pressure contours. So there is the Bermuda High. All right, as we go forward, we do this relatively quickly. We're seeing Dexter leave. We're watching some sort of African easterly wave here develop into possibly a system. There it goes. But that's not the main show. This is the one that's just curling around the Bermuda High here. There's the low that could form off of the Carolina coast. Again, staying away from shore. This is all the way out to Monday. So we're out to next week. Now watch this. As we start to pay attention to this next wave that's moving down here, the models for the last few days have developed this into something. It's there. Continues to show up. And as it does so, the current run to the ECMWF is trying to take it right over the top of the island of Hispaniola in Cuba. And in previous runs, it's taken it farther to the south, doesn't matter, but it's been there in several of the runs. And that high pressure cell that I'm curious about is this one. So if we put a big we'll call it a blocking high somewhere over the southeast. That'll influence the precipitation pattern and the temperatures here. But it means that anything that tries to come into this may have to respond to it and maybe stay farther to the south or be deflected away. And I'm just curious about the timing of those two events when we get out there to around August 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. That's the time frame over which we're looking. Now, if you go to Levi's page here, Tropical Tidbits, it is a phenomenal website. I love it. A couple things you can do. You can create a forecast trend graphic. Okay, so trend GIF. Click down here. Excuse me. I'll just leave it right there. So no, let's move it. There. Let's just see what happens. How many times the model has predicted this. So I'm going to click on trend. I'm just going to bump this up to 5. I don't know, and then create the GIF. Now it's going to ask you to save it. But I'm just trying to show you. See this? Look at these last 3 runs. That's all you could get. I know I put 5, but you can only get 3 because of the time. And there you go. There are multiple model runs that are suggesting it, and so are there in the ensembles. Now, what that was the last 3 runs of the European model. When we run the European model every day, we also run it in an ensemble mode, where it's run 51 times at slightly lower resolution. And that's not what I'm going to show you. So I'm already going out to Friday. There's Dexter, what's left of it. There's the system that the National Hurricane Center has given like a 50% chance of developing way out into the open Atlantic. But what I'm curious about is this. We're now to next Thursday, next Friday. This is the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. Now, the models are notorious for trying to do this kind of thing when you get out there past 200 hours, okay? But we've got additional support in this whole narrative. One, the Bermuda high is moving here. So the big steering current is shoving itself back over toward, the eastern side of the Atlantic. 2, there is higher pressure developing in this area. 3, we know there is a conducive environment now. It's not going to stay that way, at least I don't think, to developing something off of Africa, these waves. And the models are trying to just tease something out in this area. So you're seeing all these separate runs. And I just want to make a point that I think we need to watch this mid-August timeframe. Let's call it the 15th through the 19th for something here. And in the interim, I do want you to pay close attention along the Gulf Coast, just because there seems to be some hints of tropical low-pressure development before then. Now, that's not set in stone. I can't even really provide you a solid narrative on it, but I'm just thinking look right here. See this? This is just this Sunday, and there seems to be some sort of agreement in the models to getting something to develop tropical nature. And this isn't going to be a big, rapidly developing monster storm, but it's just something I like to look at to make sure I understand what the precipitation patterns are going to be as that goes through. So please watch these tropics with us over the coming days and weeks. Now, the bigger picture about all of this has been the Bermuda high for months, right? It's been here. I just made this map to start since June 1, just to kind of make the case. So as we get into late summer and fall, the movement around of this Bermuda high is critical to understanding the track of these systems. And what I think is happening is that we're going to start to lower the wind shear going through parts of the Caribbean and over the Lesser Antilles, making it a more conducive environment. That's kind of the main story that I'm trying to paint out of this. Okay, let's get into some radar data coming back now to the near term. We watched flooding rains go through parts of the southeast, which you can see here. And then a lot of attention went overnight to the larger, squall line that moved out of parts of the Dakotas and raced through parts of Minnesota and Iowa. And the models did a good job finding this 2 days ago, but they were very poorly initialized with this morning, which means the early morning model runs did not predict this to come down all the way to Omaha or this part of Iowa, as a decaying storm system. So just understand that some of the near-term forecasts were not very good with this, all right? As we think about where we're going with this, it's a good idea just to see how much rain we've had as of late. So this system, once again, brought heavy rains into a corridor that's been quite wet for some time. Now, that's not the only spot, but just to dump this rain all the way down to Omaha or back up towards Sioux Falls or even getting up farther here, even near Fargo, not quite to Grand Forks, but in that area, quite wet. We watched larger storms earlier in the week come through here. Matt talked about the hail producers that were in parts of Colorado, and the models did. I think the European model did a good job picking up on this flood risk, although did not carry it properly into parts of North Carolina, as was the concern in my forecast video on Monday. As we move forward in this forecast, just take a look. The flooding threat, I think, is still very high here with any additional rain, but I will want to watch how the additional rainfall moves into this part of Georgia, North and South Carolina later on today. Okay, so one last thing before we get hard into that forecast here. This is the last 7 days of hail, and I just wanted to point out again, just to reinforce what Matt was saying, look, let's go down here to the southern plains and just show you some of the hail that came out of Colorado into western Kansas, the panhandles out of some of these recent storms. And there was more hail north of this, but I wanted just to illustrate what he was talking about yesterday. Okay, now to that forecast. The story is going to continue to be the heat and the fire risk here, the wildfire smoke there, and there you can see that flooding risk that we talked about. So as we get into the near term, that smoke looks something like this over the next 48 hours. So again, contributions from the southwest and from Canada. And we can see two circulations, I think, that are really important. There is the large ridge we've been talking about this week, and there is a low. Can you see it curling up here? See it like that? Spinning its way over toward the fires that are in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Now, those fires, I think, have a better chance at getting some natural help of getting put out because of the way the flow is set up right now. So here's our large southwestern United States ridge, but look at these lows that are kind of positioned here. There's 1, 2, 3 that are coming through the flow that are eventually going to be moving over this particular region, providing some precipitation. We will watch on the southern side of this for severe weather risk late this week, and the storm trajectory will be doing something like we've seen for weeks, which is to run over the periphery of this with widely scattered storms into parts of the west. But our heat will be anchored here in the southwestern United States due to this pattern. So let's have a look at it. This is the newest update from the European model on total accumulated precip. Thank you for all the feedback. I had overwhelming feedback that you like the color bar, so we're going to use it. It might take me, I'm just going to be honest, I'm updating a lot of these maps to be faster with this hover option. It might take me a month to get this finished, but we'll release the whole thing on agweather.com very soon. But as we play this forward, okay, look at the rainfall that's coming into the Canadian prairie late this week and weekend. That is desperately needed rainfall. If we can pick up an inch or two here, now this is the prairie, this is the forested areas. Boy, they need any of this. You can also see that as that front sags through, we need to keep an eye on this corridor for more severe weather and heavier rains into Iowa and Wisconsin. And again, what's left of the system that's down here, still putting more rains down into parts of the Carolinas and Florida, which has been scorching hot for quite some time. So that's just through Monday, August 11th. Let's keep playing this into next week. This is by next Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But look at the rain kind of working its way in this pattern. So what do we get? We still get this. How many times have you seen me draw that this year as being the active corridor? We are driest in Texas. There is some sort of a monsoonal surge finally showing up in Arizona. But I'm just going to be honest with you. A lot of that is very late in the pattern. It's after the next 10 days. So it's not even now. It's like day 10 to 15. The model's trying to put that in there. And if you look at the very end of this run, see this down here coming over Cuba? That's the 0Z European model run bringing that tropical system right into this area. That's its suggested trajectory on that. So with all that being said, let's get back to the near term. We have a risk of storms today here. Tomorrow we're going to watch parts of Montana, North and South Dakota as the first of a sequence of lows goes in this direction. And then by the time we get into Friday, really want to watch right here. They've already issued an enhanced risk for parts of North, South Dakota, Minnesota, which means that the ingredients coming together are pretty solid. And if we look, I went out there to Friday, and between 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock, we are seeing a pretty sizable buildup in instability in this area. And we're going to have to watch as the front sweeps through and knocks that air up into the atmosphere, which could turn it into quite violent storms. So please be very weather aware late in the week in this area, given how destabilized the atmosphere is going to be. But after this, just something to take note of. This, again, instability is really the byproduct of humid conditions and hot conditions at the surface and cold aloft. Now there's the low that curls up by Saturday. Can you see the spin and the instability? Now watch. As we get beyond this, we start to see next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, kind of a clearing out in this area. So that would indicate drier air. That would indicate less instability, more stable air. And we'll have to see how this rearranges where our severe weather threat may be as we get deep into next week. But I want you to at least see that coming through there. All in all, this pattern, again, I watch how the models just do a terrible job washing this out. So there's our ridge we're worried about. Watch the trough here. Okay, this is all good in the near term. That's the one that sweeps through. That's the Canadian wildfire one I'm hoping for. That's the late week severe weather threat here. But then a dominant ridge forms off the west coast. Now, I love the model. It's got a good signal out there to like next Wednesday, next Thursday. And then the ECMWF just washes out all discernible signal. And as Matt talked about, and we talk about daily, it just seems to go into this climatological looking pattern with no real distinction overall as you get deep into week 2. Now, the AI model over the next 2 weeks is just a bit more, focused on that ridge. So it's got the strongest bit of the jet stream here. Troughs coming through. We know when the first one's coming through this week into the weekend. But it's trying to just anchor a couple of larger ridges, one here and here, flanking North America. And that's quite common. By the way, the AI model is also aggressive on developing a tropical system in through this here. I'm going to show you real quick. Let's just go ahead and do this. Let's go to the AIFS, and let's not do temperature, but let's just do surface pressure. We'll do anomalies. Just want to show you. There it is. So we need to keep an eye on what could sneak under. Look at that. Under this pattern, 16th, 17th, 18th, I don't know. We've got something to watch here. It's not, I don't think it's a phantom storm in the forecast models, just to be clear. So where does this leave us? Over the next 2 weeks, I'm most concerned about the heat and the dryness here. It seems to be extending a bit more into the Tennessee Valley, the Ohio Valley, into the Northeast. All right, this again is our most active corridor. It's not just in the European model, but it is also in the GFS, although the GFS is more generous with the rainfall in this particular region overall. Probability-wise, this is where we see the driest air. So again, can you kind of see this? It's this corridor and then possibly connecting a bridge here over into parts of the Northeast. That's the chance over the next 10 days it's staying under 1/10 of an inch. If I bump this up to 1/2 inch, I bet I get a new model run. I do. So let's get you back out there so you can see it. That's 10 days. That's the probability of staying under 1/2 inch. So now we can really see that corridor. If we look who's wetter in this pattern, there you go. That's the chance of going over 1 inch. So just a good kind of representation here of what we got in terms of this pattern in the near term. If we think about the influence of the rain where I just showed you it coming through, I want to bring you an update on the NDVI across the Corn Belt. So I selected all of these states, and we have the new data now at the beginning of August. And it is not just the new record high NDVI, but it is far outside of the historical averages, which again, we started getting these data in 2001. Just amazing to see what this looked like. And I can show you that's 2024 in this color. Let's go ahead and just toss on there 2023. There's 23, and just think about some big years like 18 and 16 and 14. Just to kind of show you how much farther outside of the historical averages 2025 is shaping up to be. And by the way, what sets the floor on this is 2012, which you'll see there it is right down there. So this NDVI data continuing to show what looks to be an incredibly healthy crop. Now, I understand that many of you are going through and scouting fields and seeing some pollination issues. There was timing problems with heat, but the crop health from space continues to look absolutely stellar. So with that, just looking at the recent precip, understanding how the response and the crop health has been in these states specifically, let's figure out where these temperatures are going to go. Pretty easy to find the ridge, right? There it is. Look at these temperatures out off the Front Range into the Western Plains. Very hot today, cool where there's clouds. As we then go to Thursday, more heat is opening through the Midwest, cooler southeast, cooler northwest. This is Friday. We start to see more 90s building back into the Midwest, hundreds in the plains. That's Saturday into Sunday. The heat transitions into the Northeast. We still have cloud cover. We're cooler over the Southeast. The front is dragged through parts of the North Central Plains. Remember, the big ridge begins to set up at this point, so we see more heat into the Northwest. The Central Valley of California goes back over to hundreds, and then we find ourselves here by Tuesday, August the 12th. Bigger picture on the temperatures, the models still look very similar. There's the next 5 days, and that's day 5 through 10. And then they just wash everything out and give us coast-to-coast warmth as you work your way into the middle and end of August. And they've trended this way. They've stayed this way. So I'm just going to tell you, watch it. It's all going to depend on what happens downstream of this ridge and upstream of that one. That's where our two ridges are, 1 and 2, and I want to know if they are truly bumping the jet stream north, giving us more mild conditions, or if we will get fluctuations in the middle like we've seen all season. So to wrap all of this up, I want to give you just a little bit of an update from the Climate Prediction Center. They updated their August 13th through the 19th risk of hazardous temperatures. They've now included this section of the Midwest, the Missouri Valley, Mississippi Valley for hot temperatures. They've also got a portion of the Northwest, and as Matt alluded to yesterday, the heat that's coming into the Northeast as we start next week. Beyond that, though, the European model's got an interesting signal that I want to point out to you week by week. So let's just do this real quick, getting through the rest of August, halfway through September. This is the next week, and this is out there into week 2. So there are signals for dryness here in week 2. Watch this, though. Okay, this is the model responding to that potential tropical system next week. And it tries to take something there. And did you notice it? It just kind of brought this somewhere here. So there's continuing to be support for something like that happening, while the third week of August may see more dryness throughout parts of the Missouri Valley, okay? Maybe all the way down to the Red River Valley. Now, that's the third week of August. What about the final week of August? We continue to see the model losing signal. And then getting into September, there's really no strong signal overall. But I want to point out that as we get out there toward mid-September, the peak of the hurricane season, the model's trying to hint at a couple of different areas of possible development that I think we should be paying attention to. So I'm weighing that against what's going on in the Pacific Ocean, where we've continued to watch another week of very warm ocean temperatures curl up against the West Coast. And again, that's where one of our larger ridges is going to be. And I want to know how this is influencing the jet stream pattern coming across the Pacific, because that could ultimately determine where there are high pressure cells that move across the U.S., which in turn determines if anything comes up out of the Caribbean or the Gulf or the Atlantic, where those systems are going to go. And at the same time, I'm trying to pay attention to what's going on with, our East Central Pacific wind pattern, which is going to tell me, what La Nina may do. Because as Matt alluded to, we got new data from the European model, and it continues to show kind of INSO-neutral, the weak La Nina conditions this fall and winter. The spread is very large, but most models have concluded that it's going to be cooler than average, and they're responding in kind to that. So my last thing I want to show you today is, here's the August, September, October, September, October, November, December ocean temperature pattern. So there's all that warmth in the North Pacific, but there's your cool here, the tail end of the hurricane season having plenty of heat to feed off of. But if we come into the United States, and let's just take a look at some precip stats here. This is how, there we go. This is what the model's suggesting now for August, September, October. By the way, last month, if you're curious what it predicted for August, September, October, that's what it had. No. I'm sorry. That's what it had. Large area of dryness. And the new run, this just shows you how terrible these models have been performing, is now very wet here, suggesting homegrown systems to keep an eye on. And now it's got more storms in that corridor. Very weak monsoon, drier Midwest Great Lakes states for August, September, October. This would be phenomenal if this occurred for the winter wheat crop, right? This whole region. But I'm going to tell you, I don't trust this model as far as I can throw it. But it's run over in Europe, so I've never even picked it up. But, here's the September, October, November, and the October, November, December. And some of this does not make a lick of sense to me. If we do have developing La Nina conditions, I think we would actually suggest to see drier conditions in this area for harvest and beyond, but we don't. And if you're curious, this is what it's got for winter. That's November, December, January, January, February. No, we can look at that far. Why not? So just a point of reference. Don't take it for anything, but it's something I want to look at. And I think I'll finish up with a bit on South America. It continues to show, gosh, look at that, above average rainfall for this area, September, October, November, which would mean a faster start to the growing season unless it's too wet, with drier conditions developing in southern Brazil. But it's been wet down here as of late. So I couldn't look at this and necessarily say that there's a problem brewing in South America for the start of their season. But with that, I'm going to stop here and hope you all have a good rest of your day. We'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks.